Assalamu alaikum, family. Peace be unto you. Welcome to the Sajda Wendy Muhammad YouTube channel. This is our technical morning talk where we talk about all kinds of principles related to the state of Black businesses. Why do we say Black businesses? This information is amazing and it's good for all businesses, but specifically we are focused on Black businesses because we need the most help and the most additional support. And we are in love with our community here and want to see our fellow community members do well. So this morning, we're going to continue our series on corporate governance, and we're going to talk about the corporate governance principle of risk management. So don't go anywhere. We got an exciting announcement for you this morning, and we'll be right back in about 3-4 minutes. All right.
O Allah, guide me among those whom Thou hast guided aright, and preserve me among those whom Thou hast preserved, and befriend me among those whom Thou hast befriended. Bless me in whatsoever Thou dost grant me, and deliver me from the evil of what Thou hast judged. Surely Thou judgest, and none can judge against Thee. And he whom Thou befriendest is not disgraced. Blessed art Thou, O Lord, and exalted be Thee above what they set up besides Thee. I bear witness, nothing deserves to be served besides Thee. And I bear witness that Muhammad is Thy servant and apostle. Amen.
Assalamu alaikum, y'all. Peace and blessings, my vibrations, conscious entrepreneurs. We got an exciting announcement for you. Check out this short video. Check it out. Check it out. I'm laughing because YouTube took our sound. I had this duty-free, royalty-free music behind that, but anyway, I had another financial trauma video that I put up, and they said it violated community guidelines. So y'all got to spread the word. We got a financial trauma boot camp part 2 coming up. You can go to my Facebook pages as well as to my Instagram and TikTok. Check out the videos, check out the advertising. We're going to continue with our pledge. We're going to continue with our spiritual expanded dimension exercises that we did in the last one. This time we're going to have a subject matter expert come in to talk about divorce and its financial impact and the financial trauma that it can cause. We got a special expert that's coming in talking about foreclosure because you all know that homelessness and foreclosures are huge, have huge impacts on the financial devastation that affect our community. So we're going to be talking about that, but we're going deep. And y'all know as deep as we can go, but we got 3 hours where we're really, really going deep. We got a sponsor this time, so the price is a little bit cheaper. It's $188. Use that QR code. I'll get some different music that YouTube likes and play the video for you guys. But it's on my Facebook and Instagram pages if you want to check it out. All right, so welcome to the State of Black Businesses. And as I explained, it's so interesting to me that in other communities, people can say, you know, Hispanic American Insurance Month, or they can say LGBTQ, blah, blah, blah. But as soon as you say, you know, Black anything, people are like, well, why are you saying Black? And why does that matter? Well, it matters because we need help. We need help in our community. We need help in our business community. We need help in our personal community. I mean, I think Black and Muslim, those two things, people say, well, why? Well, what? Well, why do you do what you do? Why is it important to you? And I don't think that anybody should have to explain why they want to support their culture, support their community, especially in our communities around the country. We really need help. And for me, as a business person that has expanded in a lot of ways from a business and professional standpoint, a lot of experiences, I owe it to my community to come back and help and to come back and teach. And so I try to make sure that what I'm teaching you includes your cultural nuances, which are very important. We're going to talk about that this morning. I'm sipping on I got my Love cup. It's a big, giant Love cup. I just love. That's my thing, right? I love. It confuses a lot of people, right? Especially when you start doing business with people They get that love thing mixed up, but that's a whole nother thing. Um, yeah, so I'm drinking some decaf with a little oat milk hazelnut in there. No, it's oat milk vanilla in there. So yeah, that's why we say black. That's why we talking about the state of black businesses. That's why I give back to my community. I get that question at least 2-3 times a week. Why do you do this? Why do you do this and say black? Why do you do this podcast? Why do you push against where, YouTube is shadow banning you? And why do you do this? And why blah, blah, blah? But because our people need help. And so many of our people are on these platforms. And so I want to come out here and offer some level of support. A lot of us, especially in our community, we are good people. Everybody is not out here trying to do something crazy. Everybody's not out here trying to scam, but good people have things that happen to them. Bad things happen to good people. And sometimes we just need help. That's what the financial trauma boot camp is all about. Sometimes we just need help. Sometimes we go through divorce. Sometimes we lose our job. Sometimes we get served foreclosure papers. Sometimes we, have an unfortunate circumstance, something like the bank messing up your bank account and now you can't get your direct deposits and you don't know anybody that you can trust, that you can switch that direct deposit to right away. And now all your bills are going into that account and you're in trouble. I mean, sometimes those things happen. And yes, they happen to other people in other cultures. But when they happen to us, oftentimes it's just an added layer on top of some trauma that you're already experiencing, already devastating event that's going on in your life. And so I want to help my family. Okay. That's the long and short of it. So please stop asking me that question. Please stop texting me and saying, with your skills and with your talent and who you know and what you shouldn't be. Stop. Please stop. I'm going to help my family. Okay. Anyway, let's keep going. All right. So today, as I mentioned, we're going to get a little technical. We're going to talk about corporate governance. And if you don't remember, I put all the notes up here because some of y'all said I was talking so fast last time. Y'all didn't get a chance to take notes. So I'm going to slow down and put the notes up there so you can see them. If you remember, there's components to risk management. If y'all were in class with me right now, I will give you a quick quiz. I'm not going to tell you, go back and look at your notes and see what the components of corporate governance are. I'd give you a quiz on corporate governance and I'd ask you what those principles are. But today we're going to talk about risk management. All right. Here's our definition. Corporate governance or governance is a business's system of rules, practices, and standards. If you're building a business, we're going to keep using our Chicken Shack restaurant. Let's say it's called the Chicken Shack. And if you don't have principles, you should have principles in place, policies in place, purchasing policies, shipping policies, customer service policies, sanitation policies, vending policies. These things should be in place. They may be small. Right now, they might be in your head, but we need to get them reduced to writing so that you have a policies and procedures manual so that you can duplicate yourself and scale. One of the key components of corporate governance is risk management. Okay. One of the key components of corporate governance is risk management. Risk management looks different for a lot of different companies and a lot of different people. There are the basic components that you will see will be the through line that are the same, but you may have a different set of risks. And when you bring somebody in like me and we start documenting the risks associated with your business, or we start making decisions, if you bring me in as an advisor and I start bringing in the concept of risk management, I'm going to take into account the fact that business is warfare. And if you are a Black person in business, and while again, a lot of us don't want to deal with this, oftentimes we are under attack when it comes to finances and business. Other cultures are under attack, but we tend to be under attack more than others. Okay. All right, so let's define risk management. What is risk management? Risk management, or enterprise risk, you may hear it called enterprise risk management, is the process of identifying and addressing potential threats to a business and reducing their financial impact. Okay. It's not if you get threatened, it's when. And I'm talking about, you may have competitors who are out here trying to threaten you. They may be trying to steal your recipes. They may be trying to steal your employees. You have to understand that that risk exists and figure out how to mitigate it against it so that it doesn't impact your business. If you got a manager that is amazing and he or she is in the public eye on behalf of your business, you best believe that your competitors are looking at recruiting him or her. So companies bring in advisors like me, and we sit down and we say, what are the risks associated with our competitor recruiting our top person? And how do we mitigate that risk? What's it going to take to make that person stay with us? And so we start figuring that out. And we figure if the person is of reasonable intelligence, they'll understand that we are mitigating those risks. It could be as simple as, what are the risks of you opening a chicken shack with your grandmother's chicken recipe, or a cake restaurant, or a bakery, with your grandmother's bakery recipes, and somebody comes to work for you and they steal the recipe and take it to your competitor? Happens every single day. Don't sleep on this. And the challenging thing is when you start talking about small businesses, especially Black businesses, when it happens, we kind of tend to go out of business and we get this downhill slide and we don't know what's happening. We're like, what's going on? Or we look up and we come up with an idea and we see somebody across town doing it. What's the risk associated with that? How often are you going to reinvent yourself? Because we live in that world nowadays where people will look and go, oh, okay. People will look at this podcast and see a smart Black sister wearing a beret and say, oh, you know what? I'm going to put a smart Black sister wearing a beret on this show. But to challenge what sister's over here doing, I'm going to make that person engage in risque behavior. So now, because my platform is bigger, the beret is going to represent this risque behavior. So when sister comes out here, people are going to associate that with her. And when she says certain things, she's going to look like a hypocrite. Happens every day. So you got to switch it up on people. You got to bob and move. You got to understand the risks that are out there. What are the risks? A lot of us know risks in relationship. We don't bring our girlfriends around our man because we don't want the risk that they might mess around or he might see something in her that he likes. So a lot of sisters be like, keeping my man to myself. That's a simple example. But these are risks that we have to think about in business. They're cultural risks. So it's important to understand the types of risks, okay, that we face as business owners. All right. And I want us to go into the various types of risk management that we have to be focused on and that we have to be thinking about. Some of the examples I just gave you right there are cultural risks. What are some of the cultural risks that, or things that are unique to our culture that impact our business that maybe your big downtown accounting firm isn't going to catch? Okay. Things like, in our culture, we are so creative. We create things so quickly, and we are in that space of trauma and stress, and so we have our creative juices turned on high, and so we're always creating. What are the chances that you decide to go out there and do something and it's no longer, and using corporate speak, on trend? So you made a whole business around a certain type of shoes, and all of a sudden those shoes go out of style because somebody created something new. That's a cultural risk, or some people will call it a brand risk, right? It's interesting how the whole Black culture analysis have become what we call now brand analysis, brand risks. I talked about that on one show. So these things is what I'm trying to tell you. There's cultural risk. What is the cultural risk that, think about soul food restaurants who used to just serve traditional soul food, okay? Who then, when people started to decide that they wanted to be a little healthier, people don't really eat pork. So now you go to restaurants and people make greens and they'll say, oh no, there's no pork in our greens. It's turkey meat. Or they may make macaroni and cheese, but maybe it's not as much butter and maybe it's not as much cheese. That is a cultural risk that they addressed, because as our culture begins to trend towards trying to be healthy, we can still enjoy certain foods. It's just like with How to Eat to Live. What happened? There are certain things that we eat as Black people that contribute to our cardiovascular risk factors. So the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, okay, stop eating all these yams, these sweet potatoes with all this sugar and butter and all of that. And we started making carrot fluff. We started making a bean pie, something that was a little bit healthier, where we could still enjoy the idea of it. Even with our coffee, he taught us to make egg coffee, so it's safer. So there's all these kinds of things. Those are cultural risks. What are the chances that you have created a brand, created a business that is very culturally dependent? And what are the chances that culturally dependent brand can be impacted by a shift in the culture? And the question becomes, how do you mitigate that? How do you identify it? How do you make sure that your business just doesn't go out of business because the culture took a shift? Okay. Very, 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 very powerful. Some companies will come in and they will call that brand risks, but I call it a cultural risk, because you have to understand what these, especially with small businesses, I'll say it this way. Small businesses tend to be tied to everyday America and everyday cultures and everyday addresses in the community. Okay. Everyday blocks, everyday streets, everyday addresses in the community. So that is a cultural tie-in that is important as a consultant that I analyze, that cultural tie-in. Okay. Wherein a lot of times with a bigger business, especially a business maybe that goes public, may not have as much of a cultural tie-in. Although oftentimes if it's entertainment based, it may have a cultural tie-in. Okay. So we have to think about that. Cultural risks. All right. We want to evaluate that. Then there's business risks. What's going to impact our business? Is there a vendor that could impact our business? Is there a vendor that could double the prices and go up on the price of chicken or on the price of the oil that we use to fry the chicken? What is the business risk? I want to go back to cultural risk real quick. Something just came to me. When you think about a company like McDonald's, they probably call it brand risk, but the cultural risks cause them to start to even change their menu. Okay. And now there's all this propaganda out there about their fries not being real potatoes, or having so much high preservatives in them that they end up not being real potatoes. That I bet you won't. I bet you will see in the very near future McDonald's changing how they approach the French fries, because the French fries are such a staple of their menu. And they should bring me in so that we can talk about that. You need a cultural consultant. And because as the Black community, which is a huge consumer, the number one consumer in the country, as their psyche begins to change, as we begin to access information that has been available for us for hundreds of years, but we begin to access it and we become more quote unquote woke, or we start to be more conscious, our behaviors begin to change. And so companies that don't change with those cultural trends are going to find themselves being impacted financially. And so they may call it brand risk, but I would encourage and push you to call it a cultural risk, and to bring in people like me who can sit at that table with you and help you to identify how do you get ahead of these cultural risks that will obviously impact your bottom line. Very, very, very important. Okay, because there's a shift happening in the Black community where we're starting to live differently. We're starting to eat differently. We're starting to move differently. And so all those algorithms that you got set up that are contingent upon our past behaviors are going to all be, they're going to all be broken. And you're going to have to do some additional analysis. It's one of the reasons why a lot of times when we start talking about things like respect and protect our Black girls and things that the AI algorithms on YouTube and Facebook and Instagram don't know, they'll say, well, this is against our community guidelines. Well, wait a minute. How can saving and protecting Black girls be against our community guidelines? How can us stopping sex trafficking be against community guidelines? We start talking about dietary changes. We start talking about healing from financial trauma. These are cultural shifts that are happening in our community that if your business is contingent upon and is preying upon the trauma associated with our current cultural conditions, you're going to be in for a rude awakening in a very short period of time. All right, let's go back to now business risk. Business risk, we're talking about vendors. We're talking about anything that can impact the business. Financial risks are also a business risk. A big one that we don't think about is vendors. You know, a lot of times your and my competitors will use our company as a data source. So they'll watch us and study us. There are companies out here that have people on their staff that just do nothing but watch competitors and gather data on competitors. You may not know that because you haven't been on that side of the table. And then when they bring all the data to the advisors, to people like me, and we're sitting at the table and we look at it, now we're able to identify and evaluate how to take that person out of business or how to take that company's market share. So then there's a graph that goes up and say, okay, we got 30% of the market share. How do we get 50%? That means that we got to take 20% from somebody else. And how do we do that? We do that by performing tasks, making shifts that are based upon the data we received when we studied you, the competitor. So trust me, while you're building up your chicken shack company and now you got lines down the street and around the corner, you're selling cakes and ice creams and pies, and it's your grandma's recipe. It's your stuff. But you got a competitor that's watching, that sends somebody in to buy one of your cakes, to buy some of your ice cream, to sip some of your coffee, to sit in your shop and see what the culture is. And then they find a way to put massive amounts of money behind it and put that in their business. And it may be that little aspect of the business that you didn't think to copyright, that you didn't think to patent, that you didn't think to trademark. Maybe it's something that you can't own. So the idea is for you to bring a high-end corporate professional in who can help you evaluate these risks. And the key thing, let me tell you what's key. These big companies, a lot of times, and competitors, because it's not their inspiration, they can't turn on a dime. They're not nimble. So they can't move quickly. But when you're constantly reinventing yourself, you got your staple product, but then you begin to add other products and other services and other things, and you're reinventing yourself, or you're changing your method of delivery, you're doing something differently, they can't catch you. They can't catch you, because by the time they catch you on that, you done went on to something else. I hope that makes sense. But business risks. So we will identify your business risk, the financial risk, any threat to the business, potential threat to the business. Now, I'm talking a lot about external forces that pose a risk, but there are internal forces. Small businesses are especially susceptible to this. You may be a beautiful, and I've had this experience, you may be a beautiful Black woman, and you get some Black on Black crime in your business, where you hire somebody Black and they start stealing from you, or all of a sudden you're getting along good and then they just get jealous. They see you growing, they see you elevating, they start getting jealous, and then they start telling your trade secrets, talking about things that they know about you. Some of that, they start practicing low vibrational behaviors, and you're not prepared for how that low vibrational behavior will impact your business. That's a business risk. And you may not be prepared, because this may be somebody that you got emotional ties to. Might be a relative. It might be a friend. And you thought that you could really trust that person. And now you're realizing, oh man, I made a huge mistake. This person, I can't trust them. But you were in a position where you hired them, or you started working with them because you really didn't have anybody else. There was nobody else there, and you're grateful for that. Well, now as you begin to grow, you have to mitigate and identify the risks associated with that person possibly not continuing to be on your side, or that person beginning to practice some low vibrational behaviors. And then you may have to realize, I can't take this person with me. They can't continue to go with me. And there's a whole ripple effect behind that. So we deal with that. We're going to deal with that when we come in and analyze your business. We're dealing with all of those. And that's some of that's a cultural risk, but it's a cultural risk that becomes a business risk. What happens if you have a loan on the business and all of a sudden you get into it with a vendor? Let's say you have a HELOC. Let's say you have a line of credit. And this happened to me before. You get into it with a vendor or a subcontractor, and you don't pay it. You don't pay the bill because you guys are disputing the bill. Okay. In corporate, a lot of times they pay the bill and dispute it later. But sometimes as a small business owner, you say, I can't do that. This is a fake bill. I can't afford it. I can't just pay this and then get up with you later. So you're arguing. And let's say that turns into a little small claims court and you end up impacting your credit. Now the bank says, we got to reduce your line of credit, or you're not going to have this line of credit. We want to have identified that risk ahead of time. So we figure out, what do we have to do? We start working towards having reserves, whether it's reserves in inventory or reserves in cash. I'm just giving you different examples of some things that you have to think about. Okay. I have a client I'm working with right now who thought they were going into business with somebody who became their competitor. So the competitor came to them, offered them a partnership. They started meetings, sat down, gave up all their trade secrets, had lengthy conversations, put a contract together, and then the competitor backed out at the last minute. And it turns out is opening up the exact same business across the street from them. Now, that's a huge antitrust issue, but it takes money to bring an antitrust lawsuit to somebody. It takes money to raise awareness around that. And even if you have money, a lot of times it's difficult to do. So you want to think about that kind of thing. What is the risk? Are people who are working with you and negotiating with you, are they signing non-disclosures? Are they under some kind of legal obligation to not go out and take this information, which is proprietary information to you, and then start a business? Happens all the time. All the time. You hear about, I'll say this one last thing. Well, I'll cover this under the next one. Then there's technical risks. What are the technical risks associated with your business? What happens if your system goes down? What's your backup plan? What if all of a sudden you don't have, your credit card machine's not working, the internet's down? What's the backup plan? What happens if your security system goes down, which controls the doors and the access to the company and to the business? What happens? What's the backup plan? All right. What happens if somebody comes in and steals your technology? Somebody works for you. Let's say you're Apple, and somebody who's working for you at Apple, is that person under some type of non-compete agreement or non-disclosure agreement, so they can't just go out and give Samsung your technology? Let's say you're Tesla, and you got somebody working in your research and development department or in product development, and they know everything about what you're about to do and what you're working on and what you're doing. What are you going to do to protect yourself so that person can't quit or get recruited by a competitor? And now you see a competitor with your same business model, your same stuff. What is the risk? What is the risk of a competitor who just sees you doing something and copies off of what you're doing? I've had that here with the podcast, where a competitor will say, oh, I can do what she do. And they may not even consider themselves a competitor. They just may get inspired by what they see me do, and then they jump out there and do it. They don't have necessarily the background and the skill sets that I have. So they muddy the waters. And then when I go to a client and say, well, this is what I offer, this is what I'm doing, they may ask me, what's the difference between you and this person? Well, it's great if they ask me, because that gives me an opportunity to pull up my background and my credentials. But what if they don't ask me? What if they just say, there's not much difference between her and her, and they go and, hire that person? So sometimes we come out here and you'll see me play a video and you'll hear me talk about my background in a particular area. Then there's organizational risks. We want to talk about that. All right. What are the risks to your organization? Sometimes you get a bad apple in your company. You you bring in an employee, you take a good employee and make them a bad supervisor, and they break down your structure. They stop following all the policies and procedures. They bring in some behaviors that are not aligned with your brand. That becomes an organizational risk. And it would behoove you to get rid of that bad apple and cut out the cancer. I remember there was a dentist that was next door to us in Maryland. We had next door to one of the clinics in Maryland, and it seemed like once a year he would just clean house, and you go over there, he'd have all new staff. Because when he would see certain behaviors start to creep into his small business, he'd get rid of it. Things like gossiping and backstabbing and just creating a nasty environment. You got some hospitals that are like what they call a Peyton place. Everybody's messing around with each other. There's backbiting, they hating on each other. You got the doctor sleeping with this nurse and the nurse sleeping with this technician and this and that and all this stuff going on. And it's just this nasty environment. Well, that becomes an organizational risk, because now this environment is impacting whether or not that doctor who might be messing around with that manager deploys some of the policies and procedures that are important. Or he or she may react to things in a way that is unprofessional, which then puts you in a position where you may be getting sued. So some of these type of interpersonal behaviors that creep into the company can impact the organizational structure. And then when you look up, you go, well, why is the company not successful? Why does everybody in the company appear to be disloyal? Trust me, groupthink is huge. And so when people at the top exhibit certain behaviors, it trickles down into the company in ways that you may not recognize. So that CEO or that CFO may say, what difference does it make to them if I'm messing around with this person, or if I've dated 4 or 5 people in the business? Well, it makes a huge difference, because that behavior begins to trickle down. And if you've been unethical, it begins to trickle down. And then the people who look at it go, well, you know what? I don't got to do what they tell us to do, because he or she messed around with so-and-so and just dogged them out. And I heard they had a fight, and I heard this happened, and all that stuff creeps in, and people aren't able to separate. You could say, well, they should separate and just do their job. Well, but most people can't, and most people don't. And so those are organizational risks. And a lot of times when I get called in to do crisis management work, the crisis is a result of the risks that was associated to the organization that did not get addressed. So an unaddressed organizational risk later became a crisis. So now you got this huge controversy. You got this one person suing the company because they was messing with the CEO, but they found out that the CEO was also messing with another director, and now they feel discriminated against, they feel uncomfortable, they feel sexually abused, and blah, 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 blah. And then now we got this whole snowball effect because there was a risk that was ignored. You may have a person in management who is stealing from the company. They may be a time thief. So they may be padding their time card, saying that they worked hours that they didn't. So they're stealing hours from you. And they have people that report to them. And there's rarely anything that you can do in the dark that doesn't come to light. So that employee that's working for them, working for that manager or that supervisor, sees them doing it, and then they start doing it. And then you come in and you fire the employee for doing it because you don't know that the manager's been doing it. or been exhibiting behaviors that contributed to the stuff that the employees are doing. So, or that the stuff that the manager's doing. So the management behavior has created an organizational risk that is impacting the bottom line of your company. So this is why corporate culture is so very important. It's important to come in. I've had several clients where we may be working on another aspect of the project, but they'll ask me to write a report on corporate culture. And I'll know the corporate culture because coming in as a consultant, oftentimes I'm talking to a number of different people in the organization, and I can get a sense of your corporate culture. And that's like an added product or service that, we would offer to the client, where we would just write up, what's going on in the culture. And if it's something as simple as, I came into your environment and everybody seemed nervous. I may not be able to pinpoint what the nervousness is in that initial report, but that's an observation. Why is everybody so scared? Why is it so solemn? So I've developed the habit that when I walk into a place or an organization, I'm automatically analyzing the culture because it's just something that I've been trained to do. And so when I'm looking at the culture, like, why is everybody so nervous? Why is everybody so angry? Or why is everybody so happy, or whatever? But there's all of these different observations that can lead to a organizational risk that must be identified and mitigated. Let me keep going so we can get through that. If you're working on a project, okay, there's risk to the project and you want to identify those. If you say we're having a weekly project meeting, team meeting, and certain people don't come to the team meeting, they could be putting the project at risk because it's in those team meetings where instructions get relayed, where we talk about certain situations, where we review changes, product changes, some of the change management stuff. Person doesn't attend, they don't know, they put the project at risk. Okay, that's just one example of that. The 5 steps of risk management. I am going to go through these quickly. First thing you have to do is you want to identify the risk. That is where usually the most difficult part is for people, because they don't even realize the different types of things that can occur that could put their business, project, or company at risk. And so they don't identify it. So that's the first thing, risk identification. The second thing is risk analysis. Once we identify the risk, now we got to analyze it. What's the threat level? We can create ranking. We can say a level 1 risk, a level 2 risk, a orange risk, a yellow risk, whatever you want to do as your rating system. We can suggest that. But how do we analyze this risk? What is this risk? How important is it? How big of a threat is it? Do we even need to do anything about it, or do we just need to be aware of it for right now? Then once we identify it, once we do the analysis, now we want to start planning our response to the risk. So if we say, you know what, yeah, this is big, this is a huge potential, we see it happening based on the data and the information, yeah, it's going down. And now we say, all right, let's start planning our response. What are we going to do about it? Okay, we're just planning. And then once we start planning, then we go, all right, we're going into full mitigation mode. So not only did we plan, but now we are actively mobilizing to mitigate that risk. Okay, that's that stage there. We mitigate that risk. And then we figure out, how do we monitor how well we're doing? So we can't just put those things in place and then forget about it. Okay, we put those things in place and then we say, all right, now we got to monitor it. Does this particular thing continue to remain a threat? Maybe not. Maybe we reduce the threat level so we don't have to do we don't have to perform certain actions anymore to help mitigate it. Or we say, you know what, this has increased. And so since it's increased, we're going back to the drawing board. We identify new risks. We're going to assess it. We're going to plan for it. We're going to mitigate it. Sometimes we say, you know what, it's pretty much been stable. So we just keep monitoring it. We say, you know what, it's still a risk, but it's been stable. So we're good. So I just wanted to run through helping us to understand risk management in our businesses. Something that when you ask me, well, what's a business consultant and why do you need it? Even if you are an online business, you need risk management. If you're an individual sole proprietor, you need risk management, especially if you do business online and people see you and can clock you and take your ideas. It happens so much. I could go into some really deep stuff, but we won't. We'll keep it high level. But I hope that this helped you guys to understand this concept a little bit in our series on corporate governance. Let me know in the chat if this helped you to get a grasp on this concept. Let me see who we got in here. Sister Betty says, happy Tuesday, everyone. Good morning, Sister Betty. Owner Financial Real Estate and Land says, Assalamu alaikum. So, well, alaikum salam. Sister Betty says she love. We talking about what we sipping on. Brother said he was sipping on some instant Folgers coffee with a little caramel in it, like his grandmother would do. And let's see who else we got here. I see Brother Ronald in the building. Brother Robert Elevenix said he just had a vendor go out of business. He was a huge part of my business. The business relationship was truly an asset. Now I have to build a new relationship with a new company. Yeah, that's a risk that should have been identified for you, especially since you were so heavily dependent upon this particular vendor. That risk should have been identified so that you had something in play if that happened, and it looked like it did happen. So that would be a risk that we would have identified had I come in and did a risk analysis of your company. Brother Ronald said quarterly reports, audit review, accountability in each role and department. Yep. I agree 100%. He also said most major companies have problems like that. They pay those to undermine their competitors. Yeah, it's so common. So common. Let me tell you. Thank you all for being active in the chat this morning. It so really happens in retail all the time. Getting to the trade shows puts you in front of what would be competitors. Yep. You got to sit down and figure out in your industry whether it's attending trade shows, whatever it is that's going to put you ahead of the competitor, give you a different edge. But you have to be thinking about that because this business world is so dog eat dog. And people literally are looking at you and watching you and figuring out what percentage of the market share that you have. And they're trying to figure out how do they get a part of your market share. Using certain language like market share and saying, well, right now we got 20% of the market share. We're going to put a plan in place to get 60% of the market share. It makes it sound not so evil, if you will. But for a small business, it can outright be evil because if that big business says we want 60% of the market share, we now have 30%, then that means that a chunk of that might either put you as a small business out of business, or it may reduce your revenue tremendously. All right. So, yep, envy and jealousy, those are organizational threats oftentimes. You want to put preventive measures in place. Brother talked about the zoo culture. Let's see. We see Sister Monica. Sister Monica says, Assalamu alaikum. A little late this morning. Got to definitely go back to the beginning on this subject. Culture projection. Yes, it's vital. Yeah, you go back to the beginning on this, Sister Monica, because what I know about the businesses and things like that you're working on doing some cutting edge stuff. And so you want to be very much aware of how to guard yourself against competitors. Some of that is just not announcing your stuff, not always talking about everything that you're doing. So it's so It's so crazy, the way that the competitors nowadays operate. There's not a lot of ethics involved. Brother Ronald said, buddy buddy system destroys the organization, hiring those who are in alignment with the order or the direction of the goals. Yeah. And then sometimes people come in and they lose sight of that because they get emotional. Maybe they didn't get promoted. Maybe they're looking at you and they decided they got jealous of you, but there weren't enough controls in place to keep you in check. See, that's what oftentimes happens in small businesses. If you're the CEO of a big company, let's say you're the CEO of Apple, and somebody sees you and they get jealous of you and decide they want to start cutting up because they got a problem with you, there's enough controls in place to mitigate them deviating too far. So they'll just have to stew in their jealousy. But in a small business, you may not have those controls in place. So that person getting jealous of you as the owner of the business can really impact your organizational structure and the culture of your business. So those are things we got to deal with. Oftentimes in the big corporate companies, we don't talk about that. This is more of a small business thing, because in the bigger scheme of things, they have controls every step of the way. So you're not going to really get away with acting a fool because you're jealous. Okay, thank you. You are so welcome. Somebody else said this helped tremendously. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. Appreciate you guys as well. Don't forget Financial Trauma Bootcamp Part 2. Please go to my Facebook and Instagram pages and repost. I'm going to show the video anyway, even though they took the sound off, even though my little music was supposed to be duty free, but that's okay. We're going to get it fixed. But I'm going to play it anyway as we're going out. But please go to my Facebook and Instagram pages. I think it's also on X and TikTok. I think we posted it there as well. Go there and repost, because we want to get as many people to understanding this concept of financial trauma and addressing their financial traumas as possible. Okay, family. All right. Peace and blessings, family. We will see you all Thursday. I think we're on chapter 7 of the Mind of an Entrepreneur book. Yeah, I'll see y'all then. But even though this video is silent, stay here and check it out. Okay.